Innovation breeds controversy. Whenever something new is discovered or invented, there is the matter concerning who gets credit for it, and more importantly, who gets to profit from it. After all, when it comes to many such novelties, having your name attached to it can secure your spot in the history books or provide you with a fortune that can last many, many lifetimes, or in some cases, both. It's no surprise, therefore, that some of these developments brought with them plenty of dissension and disputes. Number 8. The Wright brothers' patent war. Orville and Wilbur Wright might be two of the most iconic names in the history of aviation, but their careers were fraught with controversy. Most people credit them with the first powered, controlled, and sustained heavier-than-air flight back in 1903, but it is not a settled matter. Others give the nod to Gustav Whitehead, who may have done it first in 1901, or perhaps to Brazilian aviator Alberto Santos Dumont in his 14 bis. In their time, what the Wright brothers really cared about was maintaining ownership of the flight control that they created. They patented the 3-axis control system with pitch, roll, and yaw, and then fiercely defended it in the courtroom against anyone who wanted to use it without paying them royalties. As the 3-axis system is now considered a basic concept of flight dynamics, they pretty much wanted everyone to pay them. This started a patent war that lasted for a decade. Mainly affected by this issue were other American aviators like Glenn Curtiss. The Wright patent was recognized in several European countries as well, but growing international tensions meant that upholding the patents wasn't really a priority for them. Back in the United States, the Wright brothers not only limited the number of American aircrafts being built, but also actively stifled innovation. They feared that an improved system might differ enough from their patent that they would lose control over it, so they insisted that everyone used the same basic flight control. When World War I broke out, America didn't produce any aircraft of its own design. Instead, they chose European planes like the British DH-4 because they were simply more advanced. The US government ended the patent war in 1917 by strongly recommending that aviation companies form a patent pool called the Manufacturers Aircraft Association to cross-license the technology. Number 7. The Invention of Calculus. Calculus today is the bane of high school students everywhere. Back in the early 18th century, it was the source of an ardent dispute between two of history's greatest mathematicians. The question was simple: who invented calculus? The answer, however, was a matter of contention between Isaac Newton and Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz. Nowadays, scholars tend to agree that the two mathematicians developed their ideas independently and both should receive credit. Neither one of them would have agreed with this assertion, however. Leibniz believed that he alone deserved the accolade, not just for himself, but for the good of mathematics. Newton, on the other hand, accused Leibniz of being a plagiarist and a second inventor whose work was based on his. The crux of the issue comes from the fact that both scientists started to work on calculus years, or even decades, before publishing it. Newton was rather notorious for his hesitant nature when it came to this. He claimed to have first worked on calculus in 1666 when he was only 23 years old, but his paper didn't go into print until 1704. Leibniz took his sweet time as well, although not quite as long as Newton. He published Nova Methodus Pro Maximus et Minimus in 1684, a decade after he began writing it. His detractors argued that Leibniz obtained Newton's unpublished papers and derived his work from that. Of course, there is no direct evidence to support or dismiss this idea. Number 6. The Microphone Patent War. The telephone might be the most contentious invention in history. While credit for its creation generally goes to Alexander Graham Bell, there are multiple other inventors with legitimate claims to this invention. The legal battle for recognition resulted in almost 600 lawsuits, and the matter divides people even today. It's still so pervasive that we instead will focus on a related, lesser-known patent war over who invented the microphones that went into those early telephones. In 1877, Emil Berliner invented a microphone which used a layer of carbon between two contacts to improve sound quality. It still didn't sound good by our standards of today, but it was certainly a lot better than it was before. A year later, the Bell Telephone Company bought his patent for over $1 million in modern currency, and the carbon disc microphone proved vital in establishing the telephone as an invention of the future. And then in comes Thomas Edison, who filed a patent in 1877 for a similar device that also used carbon. He sued Berliner, and 15 years later, the US Supreme Court ruled that Thomas Edison invented the carbon microphone. Until his death, Berliner claimed that Edison had stolen his idea and later his recognition. However, he managed to trump Edison in another department, and that was the phonograph. Berliner created his own, more powerful sound-playing device called a gramophone. Crucially, he also invented an alternative to the wax cylinders that were frequently used at the time. He came up with something that is still popular today with purists, DJs, and hipsters, and that's of course the disc record. Number 5. The Race to the North Pole. In 1909, the New York Times shocked its readers with the revelation that explorer Robert Peary had discovered the North Pole. Curiously, a week earlier, the New York Herald printed a similar story, except they credited Frederick Cook. For centuries, the North Pole remains one of the last unexplored bastions of the wilds that seemed forever out of reach even for the bravest of adventurers. Now, all of a sudden, we have two men who are claiming they both went there, but the question is, who got there first? Cook's expedition took place almost a year before that of Peary. He delayed his announcement because he had to recuperate afterwards. Therefore, if both of them reached the North Pole, then Cook undoubtedly did so first. Consequently, Peary and his backers, they went on a smear campaign against him. Particularly noteworthy is an affidavit by one Edward Barrell, a blacksmith who allegedly accompanied Cook on a different trip to climb Mount McKinley in 1906. According to his statement, Cook lied and never made it to the top. And if he lied about that, then obviously he would be able to lie about reaching the North Pole. However, the New York Herald reported that Barrell had been paid off by the Peary Arctic Club in order to discredit Cook. Cook sent all of his proof to the University of Copenhagen, who gave a verdict that his claim was not proven. Although this was different from disproven, the two became the same in the eyes of the public. For decades, Robert Peary was hailed as the first to reach the North Pole, but his evidence has also come into question in recent years. Nowadays, many explorers and scholars believe that neither of them reached the pole, although each one does still have supporters. Number 4. The Discovery of Haumea. In 2008, the astronomical world officially recognized Haumea, the first dwarf planet to be discovered since Pluto in 1930. In actuality, they'd known about it since 2005, but it took 4 years to settle the matter of who actually discovered the space rock. There was a dispute between the astronomy team at Caltech, led by Michael Brown, and the Spanish team from the Institute of Astrophysics at Andalusia, led by José Luis Ortiz Marino. It appeared that the Americans first noticed Haumea, while their Spanish counterparts were the first to announce it, so there was the matter of deciding not only who got the credit, but also who got to name the planet. Although Brown initially admitted defeat and consoled himself with the undisputed discovery of Eris, another dwarf planet, he later accused Ortiz of accessing Caltech data and using their observation logs to find Haumea without any acknowledgement. He also petitioned the International Astronomical Union, the IAU, to strip the Spanish team of their discovery credit. After years of discovery, the IAU decided to name the dwarf planet after the Hawaiian goddess Haumea. This was a name proposed by Caltech, which would suggest that implicitly the IAU sided with the American team. However, the committee stayed as neutral as possible on the matter. In the official registry, the discovery location is listed as the Sierra Nevada Observatory in Spain, while the field for discoverer is left blank. They also argued that the Spanish suggestion at Asina was rejected because it did not fit IAU naming conventions. Number 3. The identification of oxygen. The credit for discovering oxygen typically goes to English chemist Joseph Priestley, but there are at least two other people with strong claims to the achievement: Antoine Lavoisier and Carl Wilhelm Scheele. Throughout history, there have been other scientists before these three who conducted experiments that produced oxygen, although they didn't realize it. Priestley and the others were helped by the fact that they did their work at a time when belief in the phlogiston theory was dying out. Before that, it was widely accepted in scientific circles that there was a fire element called phlogiston that was responsible for combustion. Priestley himself was a believer in this theory. In 1774, he concluded that air was not actually an elementary substance, but rather a mixture of multiple gases, including what he called dephlogisticated air. It was French chemist Antoine Lavoisier who gave it the name oxygen. Besides naming the new gas, Lavoisier was also instrumental in discrediting the theory of phlogiston. As far as him discovering oxygen independently of Priestley, however, his claim was criticized due to a lack of evidence, but also because Priestley asserted that he visited the French scientist prior to the discovery and told him of his experiments. A stronger claim, though, it belongs to the German-Swedish scientist Carl Scheele. The chemist discovered oxygen, or fire as he called it, around 1771 to 1772. He wrote a letter detailing his exploits and sent it to Lavoisier, but he denied ever receiving it, and Scheele's findings weren't published until 1777. A copy of the letter was subsequently found after his death, bolstering Scheele's claim. Number 2. The Discovery of Neptune. In 1846, our solar system grew by one planet after the discovery of Neptune. This was a landmark moment, not only due to the obvious reason of finding a new planet, but also because Neptune became the first such object identified through mathematics instead of direct observation. In a stunning validation of celestial mechanics, French scientist Abbé Leverrier calculated that there must be another planet to account for the discrepancies in the orbit of Uranus. This led to the detection of Neptune, but a British astronomer called John Couch Adams soon came forward with the same calculation. This led to debates over who truly deserved the credit for this momentous discovery. In the mid-19th century, Uranus had not been around very long, having only been discovered by William Herschel in 1781. However, it wasted no time in making astronomers scratch their head due to its strange orbit. Sometimes it moved faster than anticipated, sometimes slower, seemingly violating the laws of planetary motion. The gravitational force from another planet could offer an explanation for these bizarre movements. In August of 1846, Leverrier wrote a paper with Neptune's predicted location and sent it to astronomer Johann Gottfried Galle at the Berlin Observatory. The document arrived on September the 23rd. In less than a day, Galle had found Neptune within 1 degree of Leverrier's prediction. Now, this was incredibly impressive, but soon afterwards, Adams presented a similar claim. Allegedly, he calculated the position of Neptune as early as 1845, but went ignored by his superiors as he was just a student. The scientific community agreed that both men deserved equal credit. This view has been challenged in modern times, especially after never-before-seen documents from the British team had been unearthed. They showed that Adams made 5 or 6 wrong predictions before getting it right, and that his locations were far vaguer than those of Leverrier. The Brits went on a 6-week wild goose chase, while Galle found Neptune using Leverrier's calculations in only half an hour. Number 1. The War of the Currents. Without a doubt, one of mankind's defining accomplishments was the ability to harness electricity. It has an almost ubiquitous presence in our lives, yet we rarely acknowledge it until we find ourselves without it. In your home, like in most others, electrical power is delivered through alternating current, that's AC. It has become the dominant transmission system, but this was not the case during the 1880s. Its main rival, direct current, or DC, was the standard championed by Thomas Edison. However, he became embroiled in a fierce competition, which became known as the War of the Currents. The war is often billed as Edison versus Tesla, 2 genius inventors and rivals. However, this view eliminates the role of George Westinghouse, the true thorn in Edison's side, and a man who played an integral part in bringing AC into our homes. Thomas Edison, he was a good businessman. He found financiers, he started his own electric company, and he promoted the spread of direct current. Nikola Tesla, while brilliant, was never too business savvy. It wasn't until engineer and entrepreneur George Westinghouse decided to get into the electric game that the War of the Currents truly started. He bought Tesla's patents on alternating current and founded the Westinghouse Electric Corporation in 1886. Edison's main strategy was to play the danger card. The biggest advantage of alternating current, which was high voltage, also made it far more hazardous. Higher voltages allowed AC to be transmitted over longer distances, but the lines were mounted on poles that caused a number of electrical fatalities. Edison was aided in his quest by an electrical engineer named Harold Brown, who during the late 1880s launched a crusade against alternating current for it being unsafe. A notable moment occurred in 1890 during the execution of William Kemmler, who became the first person to die in the electric chair. Edison ensured that alternating current provided by a Westinghouse generator was used to enhance its reputation as the killer current. The execution, it didn't go smoothly, and Kemmler's body became a fiery, charred mess, which, if anything, worked even more in Edison's favor. Despite Edison's efforts, AC proved increasingly popular. It won several high-profile contracts, such as the Chicago World's Fair in 1893 and the power station at Niagara Falls, which basically ensured its dominance. Edison's electric company, under pressure from its financiers, stopped supporting direct current. A last memorable moment in the War of the Currents occurred in 1903. A female Asian elephant named Topsy was executed by electrocution at Luna Park in Coney Island. A crew from Edison Studios filmed the event, which in recent years has been touted online as another Edison stunt to show that AC was so dangerous that it could kill an elephant. In reality, though, this had nothing to do with it, and it took place a decade after the war had ended and Edison had lost. The crew, they were simply there to make a kinetoscope movie. So I really hope you found that video interesting. If you did, please do hit that thumbs up button below. Also, subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. Why not? And also, if you are subscribed or if you're about to subscribe, make sure you hit the bell thing, because then you'll actually find out when we put out a new video. Like I said, did I say like this video? Do that, and I'll see you next time.